Emma Parker thought she had escaped Daniel Cole the night he attacked her in her apartment, yet 5 years later, his name resurfaced in the most chilling way when investigators revealed he was the man who murdered young mother Sarah Mitchell. In the fall of 2012, Emma Parker was 24 years old and just starting to find her footing in life. She had graduated from nursing school earlier that year, landed her first real job at a local hospital, and rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in the center of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Emma had grown up in the same small community where the streets were quiet, neighbors greeted each other at the grocery store, and people rarely locked their front doors. For Emma, this was home safe, predictable, familiar. Or at least it had always felt that way. When Emma first met Daniel Cole, she didn't see danger. He worked at a nearby auto shop, the kind of place everyone in town visited at one point or another. He was tall, easy with compliments, and seemed genuinely interested in her work. At first, Daniel appeared caring, often showing up with flowers or offering to drive her to late shifts. Their relationship moved quickly, and for a while Emma thought she had found someone steady, someone who wanted the same simple life she imagined for herself. But beneath the charm was something else, something darker she didn't notice until it was too late. The first signs were subtle. Daniel wanted to know who she was texting, why she was late, or why she had plans that didn't involve him. He grew moody when Emma spent time with her friends. At first, she dismissed it as jealousy or insecurity. She convinced herself it was just part of being in a serious relationship. But soon, his questions turned into accusations and his compliments into cutting remarks. Emma began to feel like she was always walking on eggshells, careful not to upset him. By the summer, the relationship had unraveled. Emma finally gathered the courage to end things, telling Daniel she needed space and independence. He didn't take it well. He called constantly, left notes on her car, and waited outside her apartment. Friends warned her he was crossing lines, but Emma didn't think he would actually hurt her. She underestimated him. One night in September, Daniel showed up unannounced. Emma had just returned from a long shift, exhausted, when she heard a knock at her door. She considered ignoring it, but when she saw his face through the peephole, her chest tightened. Against her better judgment, she cracked the door open. Daniel pushed his way inside, angry and demanding to talk. His voice was sharp, his words slurred from drinking. The argument escalated quickly. When Emma tried to walk away, he grabbed her wrist, yanked her back, and shoved her hard against the wall. The shock of it froze her. She had never seen him like this before. His hand pressed against her throat, not tight enough to choke, but enough to terrify her. Emma's mind raced with panic. She managed to twist free and scream, which startled him just long enough for her to run into the hallway and bang on a neighbor's door. The sound of footsteps spooked Daniel, and he bolted before anyone else saw him. Emma reported the assault immediately. Police officers took her statement, photographed the bruises on her arms, and assured her the matter would be handled. Daniel was arrested but released within days. He was charged with misdemeanor assault, given probation, and ordered to attend anger management. Emma felt let down by the outcome, but she tried to focus on healing. She told herself the worst was behind her, that she had escaped a dangerous man. At the time, she believed that chapter of her life was over. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a story that would grow darker with time. In 2017, 5 years had passed since Emma's attack, and in another part of town life carried on in its ordinary rhythm. Sarah Mitchell was a 34-year-old mother of 2 young children, juggling work, parenting, and the responsibilities of maintaining a household. She worked at a local grocery store, often taking evening shifts to fit around her kids' schedules. Friends and neighbors described her as warm and dependable, the kind of person who would lend a hand without being asked. Sarah had a close circle of family nearby, and her children were her world. To those who knew her, she seemed steady, grounded, and happy, though she carried the weight of single motherhood with quiet determination. On an autumn evening in late October, Sarah finished her shift at the store around 10 p.m. She was tired, ready to head home, and thinking of the children waiting for her. The security camera captured her walking out of the store with her bag over her shoulder, her car parked just a few spaces away. Nothing about the footage suggested anything unusual. But by morning, Sarah had not returned home. When her children's grandmother came by to take them to school, she found the lights in Sarah's house still on and her bed untouched. Concern quickly turned to alarm, and a missing person report was filed within hours. Police began their investigation by retracing her last known steps. Her car was discovered still in the parking lot of the grocery store, the driver's side door unlocked, the keys on the passenger seat. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no clues left behind that pointed to what had happened. News of Sarah's disappearance spread quickly. Local television stations aired her photo, her soft smile framed by shoulder-length hair, and volunteers joined search efforts. For days, groups of people combed through fields, trails, and wooded areas. Flyers were taped to utility poles and windows, asking anyone with information to come forward. The community, shaken by the suddenness of her disappearance, held vigils where candles flickered in the night air. Detectives worked every angle. They spoke to co-workers, family members, and old acquaintances. They looked at security footage from surrounding businesses. Still, there were no leads strong enough to push the case forward. Everyone close to Sarah was cooperative, and no one had any idea who might want to harm her. The absence of answers only deepened the sense of unease. Weeks turned into months. Her children's faces appeared on the evening news, holding photographs of their mother and pleading for her safe return. The case felt heavy with silence, as if the truth was buried somewhere no one could reach. For Sarah's family, every day without her was a day of uncertainty, torn between hope and grief. For investigators, the lack of evidence was frustrating, each lead ending in another dead end. Sarah Mitchell had vanished without a trace, leaving behind children who continued to wait for a mother who never came home. Nearly a year after Sarah Mitchell vanished, the unanswered questions weighed heavily on her family and community. For many, hope had slowly given way to dread. Then, in the spring of 2018, a hiker exploring a wooded area several miles outside of town stumbled upon something unsettling. Among the fallen leaves and branches, partially concealed by the earth, were human remains. The discovery was immediately reported, and investigators descended on the scene, carefully collecting evidence from the remote location. Forensic testing confirmed the worst fears. The remains belonged to Sarah. Alongside her skeletal frame were fragments of clothing consistent with what she had been wearing on the night she disappeared. The news devastated her family, though it brought an end to the uncertainty they had lived with for so long. The case was no longer about finding Sarah alive, but uncovering who had taken her life. An autopsy revealed she had been strangled. The manner of death suggested something personal, intimate, and deliberate. Investigators began to build a timeline once again, looking back at Sarah's life before her disappearance. They pored over her relationships, her routines, and any individuals who might have had a reason to harm her. In doing so, a name surfaced: Daniel Cole. Detectives discovered that Sarah and Daniel had briefly dated months before she vanished. Friends described the relationship as short-lived but tense. Sarah had confided that he was controlling and quick to anger, qualities that had unsettled her enough to end things. At the time, she hadn't considered him dangerous, but her friends remembered her saying she felt relieved when it was over. That detail, paired with his history of aggression, caught the investigators' attention. They dug into Daniel's background and found more troubling information. His criminal record revealed a misdemeanor assault charge from 2012 involving another woman, Emma Parker. Reports described an attack inside her apartment, where he had grabbed her by the throat. Though the case had been resolved with probation and counseling, it painted a clear picture of a man capable of violence. The similarities between Emma's assault and Sarah's death were difficult to ignore. Detectives began re-examining Daniel's movements in 2017. Cell phone records placed him near the grocery store on the night Sarah disappeared, contradicting his earlier claims that he had been home. Neighbors later recalled odd behavior during that period: his garage door opening late at night, his sudden and unexplained absences, and a nervous energy that seemed out of place. At the time, no one thought much of it, but in hindsight, the details grew more suspicious. The discovery of Sarah's body had finally given investigators a chance to connect the dots. What once looked like a clean disappearance now revealed a possible pattern of escalating violence. They began piecing together a case against Daniel, each piece of evidence hinting that Sarah's life had been taken by the same man who had once terrified Emma. The hunt for answers had shifted from mystery to pursuit, and the quiet man who once blended into the background of town life was now at the center of a homicide investigation. Detectives moved carefully as they built their case against Daniel Cole. The disappearance of Sarah Mitchell had haunted the community, and now that her remains had been found, there was a growing urgency to deliver justice. Investigators knew that suspicion wasn't enough; they needed undeniable proof that Daniel was responsible. They began with the simplest starting point: technology. Cell phone records painted a picture of his movements on the night Sarah vanished. Data showed his phone connecting two towers near the grocery store, directly contradicting his claim that he had stayed home. The records didn't just place him near Sarah's last known location. They tracked his route toward the remote wooded area where her body was eventually discovered. Detectives secured a search warrant for his property, combing through his home, car, and garage. In the corner of the garage, investigators found a coil of rope. At first glance it looked ordinary, but closer examination revealed fibers consistent with those collected from Sarah's clothing. This physical link, though small, was powerful. Alongside it, detectives discovered several items that raised questions: women's jewelry, a scarf, and a torn handbag strap. None of these could be immediately connected to Sarah, but their presence added to the unease about what else Daniel might have been hiding. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Daniel denied any involvement. He insisted he and Sarah had ended their relationship on neutral terms and claimed he hadn't seen her since. But his explanations were inconsistent, changing slightly each time detectives pressed him. His calm exterior cracked under questioning, and the more he tried to distance himself, the deeper the suspicions grew. For prosecutors, Daniel's violent past became a crucial piece of the puzzle. Emma Parker's testimony about her assault in 2012 was revisited. Her description of how Daniel had pinned her and gripped her throat mirrored the cause of Sarah's death. The parallels were undeniable, showing a clear pattern of escalating aggression. What had once been brushed aside as a misdemeanor now appeared to be the warning sign of something much darker. Emma learned about Daniel's arrest through a news report. Seeing his face on the screen sent a chill down her spine. She had tried for years to bury the memory of his attack, convincing herself she had moved on. Now, the realization hit her with full force: she had survived an encounter with a man who would later take another woman's life. Her fear was mixed with guilt, as though her silence after the assault had somehow allowed him to continue unchecked. But she also knew the system had failed to take his behavior seriously back then, reducing his crime to a minor offense. Detectives brought Emma into the case, and her willingness to testify gave prosecutors a stronger narrative. They could now present Daniel not as a man who acted on impulse, but as someone with a long-standing history of violence toward women. The evidence, combined with his past, painted him as a predator who had finally escalated to murder. With this, investigators were ready to take him to trial, determined to ensure that Sarah's death would not be another case lost to the shadows of unsolved crimes. The courtroom was packed when Daniel Cole's trial began. Reporters filled the benches, cameras flashed outside the courthouse, and every day Sarah Mitchell's family arrived early, clutching framed photographs of the woman they had lost. The air inside was tense, as if the whole town had gathered to watch justice unfold. Prosecutors laid out the case with precision, beginning with the night Sarah disappeared and tracing every step that led to the discovery of her body. They highlighted the cell phone records, the rope fibers from Daniel's garage, and the eerie similarities to his past assault on Emma Parker. Piece by piece, the puzzle was reconstructed in front of the jury. The defense tried to undermine the case, claiming the evidence was circumstantial. They argued that Daniel's relationship with Sarah had ended peacefully and suggested someone else could have been responsible, but their arguments struggled to hold weight against the mountain of connections. The jury listened as forensic experts explained how the rope fibers matched, how the cell towers tracked Daniel's movements, and how the evidence placed him at the scene no one else could explain. When Emma took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She spoke calmly, her voice steady but edged with the memory of fear. She described the night Daniel attacked her, how his hand had pressed against her throat, and how helpless she had felt. She explained that though she had survived, the attack had stayed with her, a shadow she had never quite escaped. Her testimony drew a direct line between Daniel's past violence and Sarah's tragic death, showing the jury that this was not a man who acted without warning, but someone who had been dangerous for years. Sarah's family members also testified, painting a picture of who she was beyond the crime. They spoke of her kindness, her dedication to her children, and the emptiness left in their lives since her disappearance. Their words reminded the jury that the case was not just about evidence, but about a real woman who had been taken too soon. The trial lasted several weeks, each day pulling the community deeper into the details of Daniel's life and choices. When the jury finally deliberated, the wait felt endless. After hours behind closed doors, they returned with their decision, guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict delivered a wave of emotion through the courtroom, relief for some, grief for others, but a clear sense that justice had been served. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without parole. For Sarah's family, the ruling offered closure, though it could never replace the life stolen from them. Her children would grow up without their mother, but they would know that the man responsible had been held accountable. For Emma, the verdict was both painful and empowering. She had faced the man who once tried to break her, and in speaking out, she had helped ensure he could harm no one else again. As the community absorbed the outcome, one truth lingered: the warning signs had been there all along. A violent act dismissed years earlier had been the beginning of a path that ended in tragedy. The case served as a reminder that early patterns of abuse cannot be ignored, and that silence only allows danger to grow stronger. In the end, the trial was more than a conviction. It was a lesson carved into the town's history, one that no one would forget.